You are listening to the Success Leaves Clues podcast, where we're having conversations with regular people doing outstanding and legacy-changing things in corporate America and entrepreneurship. If you're looking for the blueprint to help you make less mistakes on your journey to freedom and ultimate purpose, then this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Dr. K. Dr. K.
All right, I'm here today with Keith Keppner, and we are going to have a great conversation about coaching, mentoring, because he's a special kind of coach. You're a boxing coach, and I'm quite sure you take people, through a different journey than what most people have gone through just in their professional careers.
Right. That's right. And then what's been great, though, is taking that process and applying it to a little bit more of a business or a professional career, with them moving into coaching business owners. Right. So it's cool because, you get to take a level of the next edge that a lot of, I think, business coaches and whatnot don't have. Right.
Yes. I know from my personal life, athletics and playing sports in school and things like that have really helped me in my professional career, like you were talking about. So it's things that, like discipline and, showing up on time, things like that. So is that what you're talking about? You kind of take your clients through?
Yeah, I definitely would say so, as well as the fact that, just like a good coach helps you identify what are the things you can control and can't control, right? So it's like you can't always control that you're going to get the W, right? Mm-hmm. But you can control if you put the work in, if you're properly conditioned, if you've been doing your technical work, things like that. And so taking that type of mindset, because I think also oftentimes in at least the business sense or the entrepreneurial world or even in people's personal lives, it's unlike a game in the sense that it's multifactorial, right? There's so many different things that are going on. It's not just a scoreboard or whatever, and there's not a begin and end time necessarily. And so it can make things very complicated. And obviously, as I'm sure you know, complexity is the enemy of execution. So that's where kind of, really just doing our best to identify what are factors we can control, can't control. Like, for instance, in a business sense, it's like the economy. You can't control the economy. Or like in a boxing sense, right? I had some fighters fight last weekend. The judges, you can't control them. The referee. Oh, that's right. That was one big thing. The referee, right? There's this referee that was, he was really green and not very good at what he did. And it's like, that's okay. We can't control that, but we need to control what we do with that situation, right?
So you are mentioning complexity. If I caught this right, complexity is the enemy of execution?
Yep, exactly.
So how does that hinder you or hold you back from execution?
Yeah, well, so think about it this way: is that think about like on the battlefield or in any arena, if your area in front of you, what you see is foggy, has a lot of debris or a lot of distractions, man, it's gonna, like, if you do execute, it's gonna be sloppy, or you might not execute at all. And I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with nowadays in our super prosperous world, right? Anyone that lives in the Western world, has a gift that's unlike anything else in the history of the world. And so, whereas other individuals throughout history and also in current times that are maybe in a country or society where there are no options, there's only one option. Or it's like I spent a couple of years living in Mexico, and Mexico is a third world country. And I got to not just vacation there, but actually live alongside people that, they literally live in a room that's the size of your closet, and they have a dirt floor, and they have like 3 kids and a wife with them that live in that, and that's their house. And, so experiencing what that is, which is a great lacking of opportunities. And so it's like, if you only have one opportunity, that's why those folks, when they come to a place like America, they typically succeed, because now they actually can take the focus and all the constraints that they had and break from that and execute. But like, let me give you an example, like with like coaching fighters, right? So that's an easy one, is that if I was going to coach you as a fighter and maybe it's in between rounds, right? Or maybe it's before the fight, the worst thing I can do is give you a whole lot of different things to think about, right? Make it complex. I need to just eliminate all the extra stimulus that you might have going on in your mind. It's enough anyway of, maybe a little bit of tension, anxiety, fear, anticipation, and help you just zero in on what are the most important things that you need to focus on. And with the realm of boxing, it's relaxation. It's just simply the more relaxed fighter, not lackadaisical, but relaxed, is going to be the one that succeeds. And you think about the same thing with almost anything in life, the professional and the high level individual is the one that's just a cold executor, right? There's not hatred. There's not necessarily excitement even. It's none of those things. You know, they might have that in their training or in their preparation or after victory is achieved, but they don't let emotions cloud their judgment or anything else. And so that is really that ideal zone that, again, was preached to my father, who was my boxing coach, and from his coach to him, is just like, you get loose, you go to the top. And I find that's true with boxing, but with business, social interactions, everything.
Yeah. There's a lot in that with experiencing something from another country. You know, I was in the military, so I had the opportunity to travel the world. Right. And I've seen what, you know, true third world countries are like. You know, I grew up with my mom saying, you know, eat all your food. There's somebody starving in Africa. And it never hit home until, you know, until I saw somebody in a situation like that. And so that definitely changed your perspective. But I also caught that your father was your boxing coach?
Correct. Yeah.
What was that like?
So he was my
growing up.
It was a great experience. Yeah. So growing up, right. So he was a boxing coach. So I grew up with boxing kind of in the background, and, you know, I went to the gym here and there. It wasn't my thing. My mom is an artist and very artistic, and she passed on those genes to my sister and I. Okay. And so everyone thought that Keith was going to be some type of painter or animator. I was really into animation, film, things of that nature. And then it wasn't until I got really sick that I was so tired of being a weakling, right? And these were my formative years of being a teenager, and all my other friends are, you know, getting stronger, you know, becoming more men, really. And I'm like 125 pounds, and, you know, I literally have limp wrists, like carpal tunnel in both my wrists at this time, and joint issues and everything else. And I had Lyme disease and was undiagnosed at that time. And that's when I finally got a diagnosis. I said, you know, what am I going to be? I'm going to be 35 actually this Saturday. I was like, am I going to be 35 and be in the exact place I am right now? Or am I going to take control of my health? And again, like we talked about before, control the things that I can control, and get better. And so that's where I used the Field of Diamonds in my own backyard, which was boxing, and having him as a coach. And so during those times that he coached me as a boxer, you know, he and I were best of friends, like literally the best of friends. And he was really my only friend at that time, because at that time all my peers that I was around, you know, were doing things like smoking weed, drinking, things like that. And I had sworn off that life to progress on to something else.
Man, what was it like growing up? You said before you were diagnosed, were you just having, you know, thoughts that you weren't as good as your peers or something like that? Because I know it sucks being, you know, smaller or not the size you want to be, especially in high school age.
Right. Oh yeah. It was this whole thing, I tell you, where when the results finally came in from the blood test that my mom just happened to get for me after, you know, no doctor, at this time, the CDC didn't recognize Lyme disease in Georgia, which is where I live. And so no doctor thought that that's what was wrong with me. They thought it was impossible or, you know, very unlikely. And so anyway, she got me a test. I remember the results came back, and I remember that night we were sitting, you know, I played a bunch of music and things like that, played in bands, sitting with my best friend at the time. We were recording some stuff. And I remember she called me up. I was like, oh, you know, what the hell? She's going to pick me up early or something? Like, what's up? And 17 at this time, and still didn't have a license. And she said, you know, you have Lyme disease. It came back positive. And I remember I was so happy, not because, okay, now I get to call myself a sick person, but because who I wished I was not necessarily my fault. And there was a way that I could get better, because this whole time I'm struggling with this idea that, like, am I just this much of a loser? Am I just this much of a pathetic person? Cause, you know, I would get motivated, you know, I would do my best to inspire myself, chug a bunch of energy drinks and try to get some work done or try to hold a job. And I just ended up always crashing. And I thought, it's like, am I really just that much of a loser? And so having to deal with those type of feelings at that age, when all your peers, like, you know, like we're talking about, are, you know, getting ready to go to college or whatnot, or working jobs, having girlfriends, and I'm just like falling apart. And so it really helped, though, because, you know, let me tell you, to come from that place of thinking that you are nothing, right? To think that you're going to be, you know, just this worthless, almost, you know, scum is really how I viewed it. And then to realizing that you do have worth, and then also learning how to build your worth from nothing inside of you. I'm really grateful for that. Cause, you know, I don't come from a a super poor background or anything like that. Like upper middle class, grew up on like 40 acres, which is where I got bit by a tick. So, to have that gift, because so many kids that come from a middle class or upper middle class background, that's sometimes the worst place to be, because you're comfortable, right? You have people that are willing to help you out, and you have a soft existence, and soft existence creates a painful existence eventually.
Man, that's it's interesting how the revelation of, okay, now I'm diagnosed with something kind of frees you a little bit. I mean, for a lot of people, that would be the downturn. But for you, that became the positive aspect in your life, and say, hey, look, now it's something that I can deal with. It goes back to what you're talking about, being cloudy. You don't have any idea what's going on in your life, but now that there's some clarity, now you can press forward.
So true. So true. And that's like the corny quote that became my mantra, at least for a while. And I think it was my mantra enough that it just sticks now with my soul or my psyche, is that I know you've heard this one, that with any disadvantage or anything, unfortunate, carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater advantage. Right.
Yeah.
And it does if you look for it. Right. If you don't, of course, no, it doesn't. And so that's where even the most horrible, disgusting, terrible things that can happen to somebody, I've seen many people through history, far greater than you and I, that have had far greater or worse things happen, and they've turned it into far better things.
Yeah. So that was a good revelation. And you got your father coaching you. And that's more of an outlet, or were you doing it competitively?
I wanted to be a world champion. And I mean, that was so my father, my father grew up in Chicago. He was, he had an older brother, and his older brother was who his parents thought were the smart one. Right. Mm-hmm. So we always grew up like, oh, little Donnie isn't going to go to college. His dad told him his highest expectations for him was to work at the post office, right? That was his pinnacle of success. So, my father had to deal with low expectations and people not caring for him, and also having, frankly, a physically abusive relationship with his brother. Mm-hmm. And so then he got into boxing because of that reason. When he was about 16, went to the CYO gym in Chicago, met who would be his mentor, Chuck Bodak, who worked with over 50 world champions, including he was the Olympic coach for Muhammad Ali. And Chuck changed his life. And that's where my father had so many beautiful lessons as a young man through boxing. And one of the pinnacle turning points for him, I remember him telling me, was in one of his fights. It was a big fight. I don't know if it was a city title fight or if it was another fight, but he got hit by a shot and put down on the canvas, and he's getting counted, right? And so he's down on the canvas. He looks over at his dad ringside, and his dad was motioning for him to stay down. Just stay down, Donnie. Just stay down. And he thought to himself, he's like, well, what am I going to do? Stay down and be like you the rest of my life? Because, his father was not very successful at all. Mm-hmm. And was really, honestly, he wasn't a bad person, but he definitely wasn't a brave person. Yeah. And so that was one of those turning moments. So he used that discipline and that courage and self-confidence, everything else, and fortitude that he learned from boxing, went to college, got a PhD in neuroscience, became a clinical psychologist. And that allowed him the economic situation where he could then coach pro fighters and things like that. Cause, a lot of these guys, they're not like how I have it, where I have a business that we live off of boxing facilities. Yeah. And so a lot of these guys that work a day job, they need a career in order to make money. But
so your desire to be world champion, did it happen?
No, absolutely not. No, man, I only had a couple fights, and it was constant pain and suffering. But then that's when, and constant failure too. But then that's when I started coaching. Well, I got a neck injury in 2010. It was actually July 4th, 2010 in Mexico. And, it interfered with my spinal cord, and it made it so that I didn't need to get hit anymore. And I still tried to get it fixed and get hit again. And then I had like symptoms again, which were horrible symptoms.
It happened in the match?
No, it didn't happen in a match. So it happened. So what it was is I was supposed to fight that Friday, which maybe would have been however many days later from that Sunday, which was July 4th, 2010. But I was strengthening my neck, because it's important as a boxer to have a strong neck. And I was doing it in a very stupid way. I was just like pulling on it. And somehow I pulled too hard on it, or pulled it out of line or something. And I had this weird like tinge, and then weakness in my legs, numbness in my legs, weird feeling in my genitals. And I was supposed to fight this Friday. And so my dad, normally we wouldn't spar this close to a fight, but it's like, let's make sure everything's okay. Like maybe it's just a stinger, right? You know, like, I don't know, like you play football or something like that or anything?
I have, yeah.
Or basketball. Okay.
Yeah,
so, you know,
basketball's my
stingers,
sport,
right?
but yeah.
But you know, like when you get like hit maybe in football, it's like little like twinge in your neck type thing, right?
Yeah.
But like maybe it's something like that, right? You know, it's like, you know, maybe it's just a little bit excessive type of that. So anyway, sparred that Wednesday, went to the local boxing gym, which was literally outside, just had like these like rubble walls and everything else, dirt floors, and sparred this guy, Adrian, who was smaller than me. And he hit me high on the head. And normally like getting hit here, like, you know, here you can get bothered, but just like right here like that, nah, it's not normally going to bother you. So he hit me with the right hand like that. And I just went down, and I've never gone down from a headshot ever. Okay. I went down one time from a body shot, but never from a headshot. I have a big head, and I was tough like that. And, you know, and that's where a lot of times going through Lyme disease treatment, I would just get the hell beat out of me, but I'd be like, no, I can just keep going. My dad's like, you're just getting hit. But anyway, so, I got that injury, and I got back up, and my dad said I was about that slow trying to throw punches. And, then Adrian, being a good fighter, he went on to be pro, hit me again with the same shot, put me down again. And then for the next 2 weeks, man, it's like I couldn't move my neck. Like I said, I had the numbness even worse, and just some really horrible like symptoms with your manhood that are gone now, thank God. But with all of that, then I tried to get it fixed and whatnot. They found a lot of bone spurring in my neck, and needless to say, I need to stop boxing. But all of that helped me be a great coach, because now all of this lack of success that I had with boxing, when I started coaching other people that didn't have all the health challenges I had and everything else, wow, like people started to have a lot of success very quickly, because all of the lessons that I had learned, I could give them.
Yeah, you can help them get to their end goal a lot faster, because you know the mistakes, you've been down the road, and that's why it's so important to have a coach or a mentor. And it's basically the way God set it up, right? We have parents for a reason. Obviously, they give birth to us, but they're there as your mentor, help you through life.
Oh, it's so true. Well, and think about this. You might not have thought about this before. I hadn't thought about this until about a year ago when I first heard it, think about it, even like 4,000 years ago, right? Yeah. Like 2,000, hunter-gatherer types, right? Like there's a reason why they help keep the elderly alive, right? Because think about it. Someone who's elderly, they're not able to fight off predators. They're not able to do as much work as everyone else. But what's the advantage? Well, man, if there's like a famine that comes around every 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, they would have known about the last one or have like knowledge about that. So there's a lot of survival utility from someone. And same thing goes now, like with economic conditions, right? It's like, we think these past 3-4 years have been the worst ever. It's like, well, compare that to,
2008.
The flu. Yeah. And like, World War I, World War II. Well, in between that, you have a pandemic, all this stuff, so.
Yeah. So that experience is valuable. Like you said, even though they don't look like the strongest members of our society, that's probably the reason why we don't push them out or just, leave them to fend themselves. Not to mention they helped us. So it's kind of, we got to return that favor, right?
That's right. And then they still have use, man. Cause think about it, humans, when we have the least amount of resources, we have to make the hardest choices. Right. Mm-hmm. And so individuals in those, like hunter-gatherer tribes, man, is like on the brink of starvation all the time. And so if that person's not valuable, you might not keep them around, and they won't want to be kept around if they don't have a value, but they do have the value of knowledge. And that's where, me having my father in boxing literally made it so that I could fast track myself as a coach. And, cause all I did for 3 or 4 years was nothing but boxing. I didn't go to school. I didn't do anything else. I just basically focused on getting my health right and studying boxing with him and training boxing. And, so that I got to the point where, and it's not just me saying this, where people that were trained by him that I would train said, it's exactly like training with your father. It's exactly the same. And so I got to that level, and only when I got to that level did I actually start adding. And then that's a whole nother story with that. But anyway, that's what we got to do though.
What do you mean
with
adding?
The mentors? We got to, what do I mean by adding?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, making it my own.
Okay.
So maybe discovering new things, maybe incorporating new aspects, because that's a big challenge I see individuals in the business realm, the boxing realm, and in many realms have challenges with, is they will try to be creative too early. Right. And I'm a creative type person, man. I love being creative. That's one of my biggest natural tendencies. But with my father, who is great because he is not a creative person much at all. And he's no longer with us, but he for his time, just very, execution and that's it type individual, analytical. And yeah, so being around that 24/7, it really helped me just Like, let me just learn everything he says to do. And he was a little bit too black and white with everything, but it's like, just learn it like this, learn it like this, learn it like this. I got all of that. And that's the foundation. And then once you have the foundation, then you can add little things here and there. But if you try to, I see so many, for instance, boxing coaches starting out, they'll try to take a little something they learned from YouTube here, a little something they, saw someone do here, or something that they used to do here. And they try to mush it all together, but they don't have this like really hard foundation. And therefore there's gaps, and so some of those things do make sense, but they make sense in the context of having an underlying foundation.
So are you coaching people that you prefer to have no experience, no foundation, and you're helping them build, from the ground up? Or are you looking for more experienced athletes that you can help improve where they're already at?
That's a great question. So it's definitely the former. That's something as a brand we preach. It's something that also just with myself and all of our coaches definitely do generally agree with this, is that oftentimes, even if someone is coached well with a foundation, a lot of times an athlete can have little ticks or little imperfections, which can hinder them. And so that's where if you get someone fresh, like number one is, man, they have so much allegiance to you, because you're the guy that got them going, or your gal that got them going. Yeah. And so there's that, real deep connection there. But then also as well, there's not all this like stuff that you have to kind of erase. I'll give you an example. Like the first pro fighter I ever coached, he boxed for quite a few years before he had like 18 pro fights by the time I started work with him. And so it was this process of like trying to erase a lot of things that were not serving him at that time. And it was like a couple moments that we were able to erase enough to do really well and to get some good wins. But there was a lot of struggle, man. And that's like also with our franchise, because we franchise our business and everything else. And we have half a dozen franchise partners now. Same thing with that. It's like we don't necessarily want people that have run a gym before. We don't necessarily want people that are boxing coaches or things like that, because there are certain reasons why some of those people are not as successful as they want to be. And it's because of some of those gaps and some of those holes. And so we want to build up that proper foundation. And then only after that, can they kind of add their little extra sauce on it. Okay.
So was your business already established and in a franchise model before your father passed away?
No. So he passed away 2019, and we were starting to think about franchising in 2019, and then started working on it through the pandemic and officially started franchising August of 2020. Yeah. And so it was, but we were built up to the point where my wife and I were out of our business. We had it systematized out enough that, it is as it is now, where, I work with some of the competitors in that location I own in Athens, but, I'm not there day to day at all or anything like that.
Yeah. I know you talked several times about your father, being your best friend. I was really trying to see if he had an opportunity to see the growth in your business or even work as a part of your business with you before.
Oh, those are some great questions there. So let's go deep on that. Okay. Is that, so he's my best friend and, my first greatest mentor. Right. And I have, him to thank, as we do for our parents, for, the vast majority of our underpinnings and base as a person and as an individual. But what happened though, I'll tell you, is that, like I said, so I mastered what he taught, and I mastered his style of teaching, the fundamentals that were passed on to him from Bodak. But then I started to do actually what he did with Bodak, which was, like Bodak didn't teach infighting. And my dad's a shorter person, and I'm shorter as well. I'm like 5'8", and I box 165. So most people that are boxing 165 are about 5'11", 6 feet. Yeah. So Bodak taught the pure kind of classic boxing. Think about, Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson type. And so my dad worked on inside fighting and teaching that, something Bodak never taught. And then I did the same thing with his teachings once I mastered his teachings. So I still kept his teachings, but then I started adding to it different things, maybe more emphasis on head movement, maybe more emphasis on other, stylistic things that are important at different levels in the sport. And he took that as an affront. And he's also, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and it was similar to what my goals were with boxing, is that, he had a grandiose personality. So his psychological profile was grandiose personality with explosive tendencies and homicidal ideations. So he had an interesting psychological structure to him, also being a psychologist, which is why some people go into psychology, right? Because they're a little crazy, right? And so he had this grandiose concept, though, that like his way was the only way and the best way, and if you don't go that way, that's an affront to him. So the fact that I started to go another way and do things, it was an affront. And so it really, the relationship really took a toll when I started the business, because I started the business in 2013, went out on my own, opened up my own location. He helped me put the ring together, things like that. But he said to me, Keith, this is your thing. And if it succeeds, it's because of you. And if it fails, it's because of you. And I was like, thank you. And so I started off, and I was doing my thing. I brought, who would be my future wife aboard, who managed the gym for about 8 years at that time, who really helped me start to operate as a business and put in the structures you need. But then I got mono about maybe a year or so into that. And so I was out of commission for like a few weeks. And my dad, he's a good man and a very nice man. And I don't think he did it with a malicious intent, but he said, hey, Keith, I know you're sick. You were very sick for such a long time. I don't want you to backslide or anything else. So let me hop in there and do a little bit of coaching, if that's okay with you, help out with maybe the fighters and things like that. I was like, yeah, I really appreciate that. So he went in there and he did that for a few weeks. But then what happened is when I got better, I'm like, I'm ready to take it back. He's like, I want the mornings, I want this time. I want this time. Yeah. And it kind of took away this whole thing because, my dad has this huge personality. And I was working on, coming from that and having my own huge personality. So it was this thing of him almost accidentally stealing the show from me. And I was just like, hey, I need you to let me get my thing back, right. Because he and I had this conversation like, hey, like this is supposed to be my thing. Like I didn't know it was supposed to be both of us. Right. So that was kind of the start of it. And then it ended up essentially with him disowning me, disowning my wife, and essentially disowning his grandchild, my daughter. Because, it just kept on steaming in his mind, and he kept on making it more and more extreme. And one thing that my father taught me how to do, which sounds very weird, but is how to cut people off. It's an important skill to learn. And he taught me how to do that. But unfortunately, he's good at doing that, and he cut me off. And so I had a little bit of in the back of my mind, I felt like I hadn't done everything to try to mend the relationship. And so I did a few more things before he passed just to make sure I literally did everything that I could. But then once I did those things, then I knew I'd done everything I could to correct the wrongs, because I didn't do things right either. I said things that were incorrect to him. And, but it was, hit that point where it's like, there's nothing more I can do about it. And then he got cancer and passed away pretty quickly from that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. But you got to a point where you did some self-reflection, right? Owned your wrong, right, and then said, look, I'm going to have a clear conscience. And then, that's all you can do. If this person chooses not to facilitate or mend a relationship, at least, I took my step forward. I extended that olive branch and did what I could to have a good relationship.
That's right. And the only time I think we should have regret is when that there was something more that you could have done in the current situation, not about the past, but your current situation, right? And so when I knew that I'd done all those things, that I knew I could move forward. But I tell you though, I don't know if you ever lost a parent, but even though he disowned me, it was still hard, realizing that your parent was no longer with you in this life, because beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I know it was hard because you speak so highly of him. So regardless of, where the relationship was at that very moment, I know y'all had a good relationship at the end of the day. You got some great
memories. Right. And the influences, right? Because, so many people, they don't have a father figure, and he was vastly good for any wrong that he had. And, man, like so many, I'm definitely not going to be that individual. It would be incorrect, but that individual that, I hate my parents. It's like, goodness, man, your parents got you here, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, good, bad, or different. And we got to remember too, they are human, right? So they're your parents, but at the end of the day, they're human, and they make mistakes. And you said you have kids too, right? Now?
Yeah, I got one child, 5.5-year-old girl.
Yeah, so I got 3 kids, and
nice.
not to get into too much, but when I was growing up, I had some mistakes, and you look at your parents as being the person that didn't do it quite right until it's your turn.
Right.
And now that it's my turn, I'm, hopefully I'm making the right choices, but that's all you can do is.
That's the thing is you start respecting your parents more when you have a child, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important for anyone that chooses to do it, for them to take up the role of being a parent, because it really does change you as a person, doesn't it? In a good way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk about your other baby.
Yeah.
So you've got a baby that's been strongly established since 2013, and that's your training in your boxing gym. But you're now in a franchise model, and I want to kind of get an understanding on how do you franchise you, because you are what I'm seeing as the brains, the talent. So how do you teach somebody like me, to mimic that model?
That's a great question. I was listening to your episode with the lady that did Brazilian wax. I was like, oh, there's a lot of similarities there. Yeah. Just not the waxing part. But so what it is, it's funny too, because like us as business owners, oftentimes we'll build up a business around ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like you're saying, it was built off of my talent, my personality, my experiences, things like that. And it was good that it was built like that. But then it became this thing of everyone telling me, well, Keith, this business is so great. It's too bad that it's like literally all based off of you. So therefore, if you died or if you weren't in it anymore, it'd be dead, right? It wouldn't work. And so really the birth of our daughter, 5.5 years ago, it was me and my wife running the whole thing. So I was there, teaching 30 plus sessions a week, as well as a whole bunch of personal clients, so like 70 hours a week, probably in the facility. And she was probably putting about 40 or 50. And when we had our daughter, she stepped out. We hired our first, front desk person, which was a super scary experience. Cause again, it's like your baby, right? You don't want to give your baby to just anyone. But we started having to structure and systematize out the front desk role. And then I started to pull back a little bit of coaching, and plugging in coaches. I onboarded my first group of coaches and putting out the systems of how to train people, but also the psychology of a coach and how you're going to approach situations, your type of philosophy that you need to have, and doing your best to synthesize you and duplicate yourself. And so it was a long process, a lot of trial and error, a lot of studying of other individuals who have done that successfully. And then, it just kept on getting better and better. And then it's like one of those things too, getting better at hiring, where what are the type of people that you want to hire and bring on? What are the questions you need to ask them? Because we were fortunate enough to, for some reason, intuitively know that the way that we operate is different enough from other people in boxing. Doesn't mean they're bad; it's just different. That we didn't want to bring on people that had boxing experience. And the few times that I had, every time I ended up having to let them go because it just was too much of a clash. And it goes back to that whole thing of, man, if you're green, you grow. If you're ripe, you rot. And people too often will, it's just like if I were to hire someone in some type of restaurant situation, right? If they've had too much restaurant experience and maybe some of those experiences were bad, where they learned bad habits about maybe how to conduct themselves, you can't untrain that, man. Yeah. You really can't.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's an interesting situation. So perfecting those hiring processes, we stole a lot of hiring processes and interviewing from Chick-fil-A and other companies that do it like that.
It's a great company.
And yeah. Oh, it's an excellent one. And so we just started putting it all together, and a lot of hits and misses, and it took time, took literally 3 or 4 years to get all that together. But then, like I said, 2019, we got to the point where we're out of our business, we're taking home a great income off of it, and we're barely working. And it's like, well, what the hell do we do now? And so start working on figuring it out. And whenever I deviate from my baby, which is the brand Keppner Boxing, things don't go well. So it's like, how can I take my passion for coaching boxing? And then people started paying me to coach them in business, like they're owning their own fitness businesses and things like that, and me helping them. So how can I comprise all these things together while still helping the one location I own at that time? And I was like, well, franchising would be the best way to do it. So we started doing that, and then the pandemic hit. And then so when I started, attempting to sell the franchise, I have people talking to me that are saying like, well, what the hell do you want to open a gym, like a physical gym. Why would you do that? Like, gyms they're gone for good, right? Like that's never going to happen again. And of course that's different now, but it was a good way to get started, right? Cause every conversation was people looking at you like you're crazy. Like, oh, like my city's locked down. Like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't want to open a business.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's great that you're able to do that now and kind of step back, take yourself out of it. But what's your role now? Are you traveling around visiting these other franchisees, or are they franchisees? Do they come to you?
Well, yeah. So for their initial training, so when someone comes aboard as a franchise partner, they first thing, and this is the longest part of the process, is site selection, right? And so we assist with that. So like, for instance, right now we got 2 that are going through site selection right now. And so that's a process where we have a real estate team doing that, and the franchisee as well, going through LOIs and whatnot, lease negotiations. And then once that location's locked in, then a little bit afterwards, then they schedule to come up here for training to Athens to corporate. And during that time, they're up here for a week. They can bring up their head coach and their manager as well for that time. And they basically, it's crash course business and how to run a Keppner Boxing over a week. And now what we do though, before that, which is a really important part, is we have online trainings and portals that they go through first. So at least you know what the term is for everything. You have an idea of what it looks like. It's not the first time you've ever seen it, right? Yep. But of course, there's a value to training it in person. So that's everything from the boxing teaching technique to operations, sales, everything. Something with the boxing that has really helped streamline it is, because think about it, we're doing our best to distill like teachings of boxing that is passed down from Bodak to my father to me. And so it's a lot of stuff. So we have found over the years that we built up our curriculum, which is it's basically focuses on a theme of every week, whether it's head movement, footwork, combination punching, countering. And the coaches teach the curriculum, because we found that we could run coaches through our training processes and everything else. But then if you leave them to create their own sessions and workouts and things like that, that's a whole nother skill and art. So we have all of that plugged in. So it's literally like cook the recipe. It's like, provide the recipe and build your knowledge base. And then we also have like continual strength builders and things like that. So anyway, they go through that week of training and then they go off to their location. We do a soft launch where I'll come out, or one of our field consultants will come out and assist them work out any kinks, also do a little bit of training, stuff like that, have some fun. And then they do their grand opening, and then they're off to the races. And then we just, we keep in contact with them very, very closely to, again, make sure that we're truly treating them like family, man. Because I know that through my experience of running my own business and my wife and I starting it out from scratch, it's like, man, like you don't even know what you don't know. Yeah, and then when you find out what you don't know, and then you find out what you don't know and you're like, well, how do I find out what to know? And you'll get misled. You'll ask people that act like they know, but they don't really know. Or maybe, just because they own a business doesn't mean it's actually doing any good. So it's like you get really crappy advice, or someone's just trying to sell you on something, right? So there's been so many times, like, let's say with marketing, right, where it's like, hey, like we need a market. Like, yeah, you do need a market. And it's like someone sells you on marketing. It's like you do it for a little bit and then you realize like, oh, this is crap. Like I'm really actually paying this person to do nothing. Like, oh, geez.
Yeah. I've been through that entire wave. So entrepreneurship, regardless of, regardless of the field or what the business is, you go through those same things. And that's kind of what I like about franchises, in general, right? Because it took you and your wife a moment to realize, hey, right now the business is revolving around us and we've got to step back, out of this business and kind of oversee it. We can't be the business. And so when you got franchisees, they come in, feeling that. So they might have to be day-to-day operators, but they also have to learn, okay, look, the business has to run itself. I need to have managers. They obviously leverage your processes and stuff like that. All that stuff for the model.
Well, and something as well, like with our, at least I think almost all of our partners right now, they all want to be multi-unit. Mm-hmm. So they're all single unit now, but they want to be multi-unit. And in order to do that, you can't be the one that's holding up the structure, right? So it's like you got to put a beam under that. You got to get another person in that seat to steer the vehicle. And so, but that's something again to teach that, to know how to do that, and to have the proper checks and balances to do that. And also, like you're saying too, it's like to know when to do that. When you start out, man, like when you first open up, you're going to have to be a little more involved. I mean, the best analogy I ever heard is it's like a child, it's like, not until your kid is like getting into their teenage years can you kind of start leaving them alone a little bit, and eventually they're going to go out in the world by themselves and things like that. And you don't need a helicopter parent them anymore. Same thing with a business. But what I see with business owners and entrepreneurs is that they'll either be, it's like they have their child, which is their business, but then just like a child, the child's like 2 years old and they'll be like, yeah, they can go out and like walk down the street. Totally cool. Totally fine. And then, horrible things happen and their business is no longer with us. And then, and then you have the opposite, which is like the helicopter parent, which micromanages the living hell out of their team and their business. And then it's like the business is now 20 years old, metaphorically or literally, and it's still completely dependent on them and them micromanaging everyone. And also they drive their team crazy. So,
yeah. Well, the misconception, and I'm glad that you came on the show because I like to show people the reality. We're in a time right now where social media only shows you glimpses and success, but you've talked about all of your failures. And you also talk about the hours that you and your wife put in the business, and that's each. So you're working in your business maybe 80 hours, and your wife is putting in her 40 to 60 hours. And I think that's the reason people leave that infant business, like you said, at 2 years or something, is because they see your end result. They see where you're at now, and they're like, okay, I'm going to start a business, and I'm just going to let it run by itself. But they don't know you've been doing this for many years, putting in numerous hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just to beat it to a death with an analogy to hopefully make it connect. One is a car analogy. The other one's a actual boxing analogy, which is very relevant. Let's say the car analogy, right? Like, I'm sure you're like this with the car, and I am now as well, where I can drive a car, hold the conversation, do a whole bunch of other things, right? But that was not the case when I first started driving a car, right? I would have crashed the damn car, right? So same thing with the business. It's like, dude, it takes all of your damn focus and energy, especially if you don't have things systematized, if you're not a franchise or some type, but even if you are, it's best to approach it like that. Now, here's a boxing analogy though, too. Like you're saying, someone that maybe is like, well, why can't I just jump in and be exactly like, where this person is that's been doing it for 10 years? Think about Floyd Mayweather, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you watch boxing, right? Floyd, everyone knows who that is, right? And you know how he fights, or how people like to say that he fights, and at least how he's, fought over the past 5 years, 5, 6, 7 years. But what I see happen so many times with beginner boxers and whatnot is like, dude, Floyd Mayweather, man, greatest of his generation. So great person to watch, but when are you watching him? Right. So it's like, if you're watching Mayweather when he's on top of the mountain and he's, the king, and he's got the advantage on every level of, who he's fighting and also just of everything. Also, frankly, the aura of like, everyone thinks you can beat up Floyd Mayweather, but wait till you get in the ring with him. And then it's like, oh man, like he's a different presence than what you actually thought you were going to deal with. Right. Yeah. But it's like, but watch him when he was pretty boy, right? Watch him when he was storming up the mountain, right? When he was in the amateurs, and also when he was pro. I mean, his first pro fight, he knocked someone out with a body shot, like in 2 rounds or whatever. It's like, so him just like freaking destroying people. And that's how he got there. So that's how you need to fight if you want to be a boxer and be at Mayweather's level. You don't need to fight how he fought Pacquiao. You don't need to fight how he fought some of these fights where like people are like, oh, he's just doing defense and countering. It's like, dude, like, but I see a lot of guys, they'll do that. They have no fights, no experience, maybe just a couple fights, and they're trying to fight like they're on the mountaintop already, and they're older. Because also Mayweather, he adjusted his style because he got older. So they're trying to fight like that, and you ain't going to get anywhere. So same thing with the business sense, right? Where it's like people, they hear Warren Buffett or people like that, or even at a much lower level, oh, so-and-so has 2 businesses and they're successful, so I should do 2 businesses. It's like, no, you should just do 1 business. Oh, they're not in their business and successful. Well, yeah, because they put in the legwork, or like you talked about, the more I see myself in the franchise world, I see the advantage of it, where it's like you actually can start a business semi-absentee in the franchise world because someone else has put in all the legwork for you, and is also, frankly, going to keep you in check a little bit because as a franchisor, and it's a beautiful relationship because it's a revenue share, right? So like as a franchisor, we get 6% of revenue from a franchisee every month. All right. So it's like, dude, if you're not doing well, like outside of our brand name, our family name, and everything else, like being hurt But if you're not doing well, we're not making any money. So, I mean,
I want to say what
like,
I know about franchises, 60% is low. I've seen 10, 14%.
It is low.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yes. No, yeah. Some people that might not know anything about it might be like, oh man, that's a lot. Like, what do you get for that? But it's like, man, at the end of the day, like you said, it's low, number one. But number two is it's like there's a vested interest. And also as well, man, because thing about this is that I've heard this just to get into it. I've heard this thing of like, well, why isn't it just a flat rate? Well, how does that incentivize us to help you? Right. Because like if you're doing $25,000 a month, right, we get 6% of that. Okay. But what if you're doing freaking $40,000 a month? It's like that incentivizes us to ensure you succeed outside of the fact that we really care about our name, Keppner name and everything else.
Well, I don't want to hold you too long because you're running an entire enterprise and I value your time. But I want to ask you a question in relation to from the client perspective. So is Keppner Boxing only for boxers? Because I've been to some gyms that might be MMA or whatever, and you can still work out in those gyms and not necessarily be a fighter. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So we have really focused on making our brand as best we can, make it about we love beginners, right? Because that whole thing, it's like we're gonna, no matter what level you want to get to, we can get you there. But we love starting with you from the beginning. And it's something and that's where we have an advantage in the marketplace because, there's a lot of places that are beginner friendly, but they can't take you on beyond beginner. Right. And also as well, to be clear with how it is for a client is that what's so beautiful is it's whatever goal you want to achieve within reason, as long as it doesn't hurt other people, meaning that if your goal is just weight loss or getting in better shape, we're here for you. And it's a great way to do it because you're actually learning things and it's more exciting and it's a safe and supportive environment. If your goal is to be a competitor, we can help you there as well. And like so many of us, like for instance, my wife, when she started competing, because she has 22 fights in Muay Thai, MMA, kickboxing, and boxing, when she started, long before I met her, she went to her gym that she ended up managing originally, just, to get in shape and to get like stronger, off of being sick. And so, but then she she did it for a little while. And then like so many of our clients is like, hey, like, I enjoy this. Like, let me see what the next level is like, the next level. And then she actually ended up having to fight. And then she went on to have, 22 fights. So
awesome. Well, the show is called Success Leaves Clues Podcast. So I like to point out a couple of clues that I noticed throughout our conversation to help the viewers be successful. And I'm quite sure they'll pick up their own things and help them grow in their entrepreneur journey too. So one thing I noticed off the bat, you talk about clarity, and that can be getting clear in life, in your relationship, in business, and it really helps you to move forward and see where you're going. You talk about also, I saw forgiveness, even when you're going through something with your father, with somebody that you're working with, if you allow that to hinder you, it's really hard to grow because you're living in a state where, again, it goes back to being cloudy because you're so angry or so bitter towards something that somebody did to you. And then,
well, let me say this one thing real quick. This analogy is so powerful is the lack of forgiveness or anything else like that type of feeling. Just imagine you have a freaking backpack on or a gunny sack that has weight in it. And when you forgive, it is you not condoning. It is you simply putting down that damn weight and keep on moving. But keep on saying
you're right. And then another key for me is just the sheer grind and dedication that you put in. You talk about the years that you've been, working for this business. And in this business, not for it, but the way you've studied, the way you've, taken on from the grades from your father, even, it takes a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of dedication. And I think if people want to be successful, they have to emulate that part of it as well.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's the thing is we get into every endeavor underestimating how much work it's going to be. And I think it's important for everyone to realize like, that's okay. That's natural because, if you literally would have thrown it all in front of me of like, okay, Keith, you want to try to take over the world. I haven't even done it yet, but like, hey, you want to try to get to where you think you want to get to? It's going to be this much work. I might not have started. Right. Yeah. So that ignorance is good sometimes to get you going, but then very quickly you have to acknowledge actually all the work it's going to take and accept that it's part of the journey. Right. And also accept that when you turn around at the end of your life, you're going to be happy you did it versus take the easy route.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to remind everybody out there, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Until next time.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Success Leaves Clues podcast. Be sure to follow Dr. K on Instagram at Dr. K Washington or the podcast page at Success Leaves Clues Podcast. We'll see you here next time.